This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Friday. It's May 12th, 2023. And we're happy to be with you. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. Let's get into the first story here. There's quite a bit to cover today. I want to focus to start on the let me pull it up here, on the this whole issue of the nitrogen issues with food. It's right now the world is the EU and the basically the green movement, which is dominating Western Europe and the United States, is saying we need to restrict the use of nitrogen fertilizer under this net zero emissions requirement because the N2O, the nitrogen oxide, basically is released, is they're saying a greenhouse gas, and it's detrimental. It's going to warm up the climate again. It's like carbon dioxide. They keep adding new chemicals. Now they want to say nitrous oxide is just as dangerous as carbon dioxide. Basically, the agenda of the left, and I pointed this out in repeated broadcasts, is that this is really not about the climate. It's about neo-Marxism and a way to destroy capitalism by convincing the world that we are going to destroy the climate. We're not going to be able to survive on Earth unless we reduce carbon emissions. Now they want to reduce nitrous oxide emissions. They want to reduce anything that has to do with production. Modern industrial state, hydrocarbon fuels. Now, the problem is if we have this war on agriculture and we reduce significantly the amount of nitrous oxygen in fertilizer, we're going to cause a worldwide crisis in food. The statistics show that since the 1950s, when we've developed these fertilizers, we've had really a tremendous growth in the ability to produce wheat and other products that need to have fertilization in order to grow in the quantities we need them today. That is, if we're going to support the world's population and feed it, the nitrogen fertilizer, which began around 1950, has tremendously increased the ability of agriculture farms to be productive. Now, there's a new paper that came out, and one of the authors of this have supported my book, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. The paper is essentially saying that these are ideologically driven disasters. The reduction in hydrocarbon fuels, the reduction in nitrous oxide, nitrogen fertilizers, these are going to kill more people than any climate changing. The most recent scientific work shows that the amount of global warming is nearly immeasurable, 0.064 degrees Celsius per century. That's all and that basically could be attributable to the increase in the sun. We're in an interglacial warming period. And this article, if I turn to the article itself, which is Will Happer was one of the authors of this. He's at Princeton. He very favorably reviewed my book on climate. I can read you, if I pull it off the shelf here, I can read you what he said. I may just do that. Hold on, let me reach. You see, these are real books behind me. It's not just a fake. Those are my book. I'm in my study, and I've got a good collection of books which I use to write with. I'm one of these people who collect libraries pretty habitually. What Will Happer said about my book, said Corsi's new book is a trove of information, especially about the people and motives that have driven the current climate frenzy. The discussion of climate science, especially the dominant role of the suns and clouds, is very good. There are also fascinating discussions of unfavorable and perhaps even incorrect scientific theories like abiogenic hydrocarbons or alternatives to plate tectonics. I do explore the expanding Earth theory, and I maintain that hydrocarbon fuels are not biological. They're not made from dinosaurs or any kind of biological material. So these help to clarify that the all too human nature of science and how hard it is to distinguish between a paradigm shift and a mistake, like today's alarm over carbon pollution, which he considers to be an hysterical mistake, and I do too. This article, which was published in 2022, said that higher concentrations of atmospheric nitrous oxide are expected to slightly warm Earth's surface because of increases in radiation forcing. Radiation forcing is the difference in the net upward thermal radiation flux from the Earth through a transparent atmosphere and radiation through an otherwise identical atmosphere with greenhouse gases. Radiative forcing is measured. There's a measure of it in terms of latitude, longitude, etc., in terms of the actual amount of warming. But he's pointing out that the warming from the nitrous oxide is almost unmeasurable, just like it is with carbon dioxide. So essentially, we're worrying about methane, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, which are not warming up the Earth to the point where it's not habitable. These differences are exaggerated, and again, not necessarily attributable to somewhat of an increase in nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. The amount of nitrous oxide in the atmosphere, the gas does have warming properties, has been relatively constant over time. That's another thing. The Earth's climate system is not simply additive. It's nonlinear. The Earth has X amount of carbon dioxide or X amount of nitrous oxide. When there's more of it, the oceans can absorb more. I mean, just because we're putting more into the atmosphere doesn't mean that it's going to have that an additive effect on the global warming, because the Earth system adjusts to this. Right now, the major impact we've got is that the sun, we're closer to the Earth, is closer to the sun, because we're in a more circular orbit right now, and it's an interglacial warming period. But as we get to a more elliptical orbit, it's going to come, we'll have another glacier age, we'll have another ice age. I wouldn't worry about it. Maybe take 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000 years to get here. But the point is, it's going to happen. And that's the inevitable nature about how the Earth goes around the sun. So this concentration, or worrying about the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, is really misplaced, and what it's aimed at is trying to limit the ability of us to survive in the numbers we are on the Earth right now today. The leftists, as I point out in this book, The Truth About Global Warming, and please do read it. I mean, if you really want to inform yourself, if you want to get understand the climate, I've written this book so it's readable, and by a common person, the average person can read the book. I mean, there are parts that are more difficult than others, I'll grant you, but I try to explain it in common sense terms. So Will Happer at Princeton did recently team up with Richard Lindzen of MIT, and they really made clear that the world is going to face billions of people around the world could face starvation if the production of nitrogen fertilizer was banned. It could create a worldwide starvation where one half of the world does not have enough to eat. Now, again, I want to stress that this is the kind of nutcase thinking we've got going on the left. They're taking a greenhouse gases, which we need for the Earth to be habitable, because they prevent all the radiation from the sun from escaping at night when the sun isn't shining. But the sun is not what the global warmers want to attribute as a major source of light and heat on the Earth. They want to make it carbon dioxide, which in climate science is nonsense. Okay, it's hard to explain this if people don't try to at least grasp the fundamental science. The Earth system is very complex in terms of climate. Climate is just weather patterns. What Earth has is weather, and these weather form into patterns. Now, the primary purpose of the weather is the sun hits the Earth at the equator. And what the weather does, the atmosphere, it moves the heat from the equator to the poles where it's cooler, and it moves it to the higher atmosphere. The greenhouse gases are important in this dynamic, but it is a nonlinear system. So that, for instance, the sea temperatures, the currents in the sea make a big difference. The amount of clouds, the clouds are extremely important in the Earth's weather and temperature. And the water vapor, which is 70% of the greenhouse gases. Water vapor is not clouds, it's water vapor in the atmosphere. Clouds are a separate, distinct phenomenon. So all of these aspects make it to these legitimate climate scientists who are on tune with what I'm saying, and that is that this is a political hoax. It's not a legitimate science concern. Chris, do you want to comment on this much? It's, I think, an important point we're developing here.
Keep in mind, it's control the food, control the world. I know it's what you're saying in very, very simple terms, but the idea is, where in the heck did these people come up with the idea that nitrogen needs to be limited so much that farms need to be shut down? The only reason anybody would say anything like that in the middle of discussions about food insecurity is to have a certain group of people control the supply chain and the food supply.
Yeah, it's a control mechanism where it's, again, too many people, the Malthusian movement, which started this whole climate movement, and now they basically think that there's too many people. That's basically the problem. And they want to control everybody. They want to make sure they control everyone.
The other idea is back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the same left was saying, we must make sure there's food provided for the people around the world. I was one to say end farm subsidies. That would solve a lot of problems. One, food prices. Two, world hunger. Problem is, nobody ever bothered with that sort of thing. That was actually a Libertarian Party stance. It's part of their platform. I'm not sure if it's there now, but back when I was kind of working with that party, that's when that's when the farm subsidy issue was discussed. But nowadays, it's limit the food supply, starve people out.
Yeah, these issues, farm subsidy issue has been around for a long time. I also do want to comment today that, again, we don't have a agreement on the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is still in flux, and I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do on the debt ceiling issue. I'm sure they will come to some agreement because they always do. At the last minute, they come to an agreement. But the point is, the United States is in a crisis mode. We will have a crash. And I do want to pause for a minute and our sponsors. Point America. Again, if you go to the top of the central page and you sponsors, you pull down the sponsor of Swiss America, this walking living dollar. Introduce yourself to Swiss America and start talking about getting gold and silver. It's walking. If you scroll down a little, you can see the form you fill out, and this form is one. If you do fill the form out, you'll get contacted Swiss America form right there, and you can buy up to 50 of these coins at a time. Introductory offer at about the price they're worth in terms of about 90% silver. They're not like coins today, which even feel like they're worthless. This was when money was being coined in the United States that had real gold and silver to it. Certainly, so silver will appreciate, by the way, more as a percentage faster than gold. Although I'm predicting that in the economic crisis that's coming up, both silver and gold are going to at least double in price. And I think we're going to have a fundamental. I've written a book with Dean Heskin, which will be out very soon, and hopefully everyone will take a look at that book because I think it will prepare you for what's coming. Your IRAs, your 401ks, Swiss America will help you transfer those into a gold-based IRA or partially gold-based, And the gold is going to appreciate, whereas the dollars are not. The dollars are going to have less and less purchasing power. And so you ought to at least think about your retirement assets being in an asset that today is going to have a substantial rise over the next few years. The crisis we're going into is not going to be easily handled. It's a global crisis. We have too much debt. Commercial real estate is going to crash. The other thing in the sponsors I'll pull down is the Macmillan Agency. Matt McMillan. Matt's going to be my son-in-law here in August. And Matt is specialized in annuities and index universal life. We're going to do a special program with Matt today that'll be on the channel. And Matt, if you again, another form, the annuities are going to be a good investment for what we're going to come through, because the insurance companies are solid, more solid than the banks. You don't see insurance companies failing. And insurance companies will give you a guaranteed rate. These are fixed annuities. We have an index into it, and the index goes up, you gain extra gains. But if the index goes down, you don't lose. You just don't gain as much. So these are really designed for current products. If you've got an old annuity or an old IRA or an old universal life policy, Matt can help you switch it, 1035 exchange, into a modern one that'll pay better. And again, you won't suffer income tax consequences by moving the money. Now let's go over here to the next two articles. There's two articles on Ukraine I want to cover. This first one really surprised me. It was our Attorney General Garland. I guess I shouldn't be surprised at anything Garland does. Has decided to transfer assets. They seized these assets from Russia, from a Russian oligarch who they felt was violating U.S. policy. An oligarch with Malofeyev, investor and founder of a pro-Russian media empire. And he was charged with breaching sanctions imposed in response to Moscow's 2014 annexation of Crimea. Basically, again, we try to punish Russia by imposing sanctions, and then the U.S. government confiscates the money of Russians investing anywhere where it's coming through U.S. banks, and we can get a hold of their money. Of course, that upsets Russia tremendously. And this is the first U.S. transfer of forfeited Russian funds. That merely means seized Russian funds. And they're going to be given to Ukraine to rebuild Ukraine. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Now, the World Bank is saying the cost of rebuilding Ukraine is going to be $411 billion over the next 10 years. Well, I mean, that's an estimate. But what's happening is that the J.P. Morgan, Chase, other bankers begun meeting with Zelensky. The bankers are circling around. They realize that there's going to be a fortune made to reconstruct Ukraine when the war ends, and the banks want to fund these reconstruction projects, which of course will get funded in large part with taxpayer money. So, when you look at this war in Ukraine, the money aspects of it are extremely important. From Russia's point of view, we've seized and held Russia's money. And again, it's an aggression where there's a proxy war. The United States and NATO are essentially at war with Russia through Ukraine. And Ukraine's doing the fighting in the field, but they're using money and weapons supplied by the United States and the European Union. And Russia knows this. Russia is extremely upset about this, and I think it only antagonizes Russia further to make sure Russia doesn't lose. The second story, which I want to couple these two together, because the EU, this EU foreign policy chief, who's Joseph Borrell, yes, he's made some admissions, which he's saying basically said, without Western aid and arms, money and arms, military supplies, Ukraine would collapse to Russia in a matter of days. Ukraine will come in Russian forces and without This Joseph, the European Union's foreign policy chief, insisted that there's no the war torn today is going to engage in conversations about because Russia sees that this is a war NATO and the United States. If you want peace, push Russia to stop the war. Don't tell me to stop Ukraine because I'm supporting you. Current war will finish soon. He wants to ramp up the military aid. He's beating drums, and this is what's going on in both NATO, EU, and the United States. He also had some interesting things to say about the potential for China to mediate. He said, even if they're side of Russia, I think China has a role to play. China is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. China is the one who has the biggest influence with Russia. He said, let's face it or not, Putin basically says, I have military objectives. As far if I don't get these military objectives, I will continue fighting. He said, so the peace plans are good, but you need someone that wants to talk about peace. Now, if Burrell thinks China is going to want to talk about peace, I think he's wrong. I think China sees this war as in China's interests, and China wants to, again, form an alliance here with Russia and Iran. Iran is coming into the deal. They are expanding the BRICS nations. The BRICS are what the initials stand for is BRICS, BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they're having a meeting first week of June, and about 19 countries want to join them. They're going to be a major economic force, and I think they will move to develop their own gold-backed global currency. The U.S. dollar is under attack. We pointed this out repeatedly. But what I'm saying here with Ukraine is that I don't see this war ending anytime soon. And I think it's one that the American people need to be aware of how complicit we are in it. I'm going to be writing some articles showing that the Biden, Hillary White House, Obama started the Ukraine war in 2013 when they decided they were going to have regime change in Ukraine and depose a Russian-favored, legitimately elected president in Ukraine. And they worked with Soros to have one of the color revolutions, 2014 Maidan revolution in Ukraine, which started this nonsense. And this is a provocative move by the left. I think the neo-Marxist left, which has become the Democratic Party, unfortunately, began turning against Russia when Russia renounced communism in the fall of the Berlin Wall. I think that was such a blow to the neo-Marxists in the United States that they have essentially turned against Russia and began supporting China because, of course, China is still communist. We have a wave of communism going around the world right now, and it is doing what communism always does. It negates and destroys economic activity, and ultimately it will kill millions of people. Chris, do you want to comment?
I hate to say this. That's the plan. That's what they're looking to do. Like you said earlier in the program, the idea is to depopulate the country by any means possible. That means control the food supply. That means manufacturing war. And when one happens, keep it going. I understand that there was a similar crisis averted in Eastern Europe between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I hope I have that pronounced correctly.
Yes, you do. That's you do.
I'm a longtime broadcast journalist, so what I used to do is actually sit there with the pronunciation key and practice pronouncing these things. But that's minor compared to something that grabs the headlines. These things, the Russia-Ukraine war is not only keeping the defense industry strong, not only keeping America divided, but also making the media cohorts, the ones who are passing the government propaganda around, very, very strong, while the rest of us don't notice, or many people, most of the rest of us don't notice what's going on with the farms in the Netherlands and how American and Canadian, European interests are saying, hey, that's not a bad idea. People don't even realize what happened in Sri Lanka. Something similar happened there. That's a dead economy now.
Well, the capitalist system works, and Marxism wants control. They want to be able to dominate. And so these ideologically driven movements are extremely dangerous. This one is a false ideology. Communism always has been. This idea of utopia and eliminating God is just a bad idea.
They want to worship the state.
Right.
People have a tendency to want to worship something. So if religious people want to worship a god, that's their right, and that's what people have been doing for centuries. But also, there is a faction of people who would prefer to worship man, worship the state, or worship celebrity,
or worship Satan.
Yeah.
By the way, we do have the store up now on the site.
Nifty mug.
I really like the logo for this show, and Truth Central is a great logo, and I'd like to see that logo go around the country because I think it is so the prices are reasonable for the items. They'll be shipped to you. We've tried it out. The store, it obviously works. I'm able to get for myself the various gear, and you can too. I encourage you to visit the store. It will help us greatly continue the program. One more story I want to cover today, and that is, this is even in the Wall Street Journal now, where they're covering the border surge. I believe yesterday was the end of this Title 42. This was a Trump program that was created during the pandemic, basically saying that those coming across the border seeking asylum had to first apply in Mexico before they came across and be approved to get asylum, which was a buffer. It meant that people trying to get into the United States risked deportation if they didn't go through this registering and waiting in Mexico to be approved for asylum. When you eliminate that, of course, the Biden administration is saying that they'll impose similar measures, just without the authority here of the law and the being enforced by the Border Patrol, of a mechanism that demanded stopping in Mexico before you get here. And it looks like, of course, the Biden administration saying that, we've had a surge in immigration, and clearly before this Title 42 ended, there was a surge. People were trying to get here while they essentially could. But at any rate, there looks like I've seen reports of up to 700,000 massing to come into the United States. It depends on how this is implemented, but my guess will be that the Biden administration has decided that another massive surge of immigrants will be a good idea. Now, I've actually been in favor of immigration. I get charged all the time, because people don't really look at the facts. I get constantly maligned, conspiracy theorist, and I get called all kinds of things. And I'm very involved in telemedicine, creating a program called Oblicon and MD. Speak with an MD. It's going to be available to Spanish-speaking people to speak with Spanish-speaking physicians. We're going to be launching it this summer. And we're not going to require documentation. If anybody's here in the United States, I believe they deserve good medical care. And we're going to do that through this program. I've sponsored people from Spanish-speaking countries, had them live in my house. And I'm very much in favor of legal immigration. I think it revitalizes a country. And I'd like it to be aggressive immigration. But uncontrolled immigration lets criminals, drug cartels, country will get flooded with fentanyl. And I'm also seeing around the country, New York, Chicago, if we did pay attention to the local groups, the city council meetings and town hall meetings, where people are saying, don't flood our community with illegal immigrants. The Biden administration is paying for these illegal immigrants to stay in hotels in cities like Chicago and New York, around the country. And again, it's a problem of too much at one time to assimilate in a reasonable manner. And we're also seeing the Chinese take advantage of this. People suddenly appear from China. Well, they didn't come across the Pacific in a boat. China said, here's an opportunity to get Chinese into the United States. I mean, this is a policy of changing the demographics of the United States in a way that will bring in substantial populations who have not been raised or trained in American values. And they'll bring their communism or their socialism with them. And that's a neo-Marxist technique to destroy a country. That's what I've been opposed to. I'm not xenophobic. All these ideas of hating Spanish is not nonsense if you knew anything about the reality of my life. The point is, again, when you break down control, when you are destroying a culture and a civilization, self-destructing, our economic crisis is self-destruction. We're engaged in basically the Cloward-Piven theory, two sociologists at Columbia, again, communists, socialists in the 50s and 60s, who said the way to destroy capitalism is to have welfare programs that were so generous that they would bankrupt a country. Well, with more than $30 trillion in debt, I think that's happened. And that's part of the problem with the debt ceiling. It's very easy with fiat currency just to raise the debt ceiling and say, print more money. We'll pay off the debt with more money. Well, that's fine, but it causes inflation. And so far, the Federal Reserve has not been able to get inflation below about 5.5% over 5 or 6 months consistently, despite having raised rates to 5.25%. And the consequences are that the mortgage market is dying. Mortgages at 6.5% become unaffordable for many people. Commercial real estate is dying, and that's partly a pandemic effect that people are working from home. Partly the economy is slowing down. There are massive layoffs. We're self-destructing these things. We could implement policies that would fundamentally change America in a positive direction. And it would start with returning to hydrocarbon fuels without demonizing carbon dioxide, which we exhale. These people are almost suicidal. That's why they call this the Anthropocene, that this era is one in which we are going to be the cause of our own extinction. These ideas are insane and frightening because they are destructive and they were meant to be destructive. Chris, do you want to comment?
I live in Orange County, New York. Okay. Recently, our county executive, just like the Rockland County executive, declared a state of emergency and pushed back at New York City, saying you can't keep sending people up here that you can't control in a let's say, I'll call it hyper illegal immigration or hyper immigration environment, especially after Title 42 ends. We are not prepared. Orange County is not necessarily prepared. Now, I understand a whole busload of migrants were sent to Newburgh, New York, and I believe there was a facility available for them. But a lot of the smaller suburban areas up here really cannot handle it. Rockland County it's heavily populated for a county a third of the size of Orange. They're not going to be able to handle it as well. When New York City took on the responsibility of being a so-called sanctuary city, they need to accept that responsibility and not push that onto others, as do other municipalities who have done so. Either that or rescind such and then handle things as they go along. We do want, as you said, we do want controlled and honest immigration. We do understand people want to come here to work hard and make a life better for their families. But we also can't have a whole load of people coming in, just hoping to get on our welfare system, which is unfortunate and unfair to those who legally want to come in and do something with their lives and improve themselves.
Well, it's just, you can't handle these massive numbers in a reasonable fashion. The people get here, they can't be provided for. Right. Get all kinds of human disasters with how the families are treated once they get here. They're moved around the country. I mean, the whole thing is just a mess.
Well, they're taken advantage of too. I mean, there are people, right. There are laborers, and there are people who'll give them a sandwich and $5-6 an hour to work, when you know darn well that American citizens have, I'll say, a right, but the right and privilege to work at least at minimum wage.
Let's wrap up. I want to. People are saying again, I'm looking younger. I appreciate that greatly. I find I'm using the My Vital C products, which are our sponsor. And I really encourage people to try these. Again, if you go on up to the sponsors and you pull down the My Vital C, you'll see that this is carbon 60, which is a remarkable molecule. It's 60 carbon atoms in a cage structure around the nucleus. And it improves longevity. I use the hair products. I use the cream products for skin. They have brought color back into my hair. And I've been doing this for 4 years. And quite frankly, it has given me energy. And I do feel revitalized, despite this being a very, very rugged 4 years. I mean, it includes the time when Mueller was trying to put me in prison under the Russian collusion investigation. They even gave me a plea deal, and then I refused to take the plea deal, and they never indicted me, which is extremely rare. But I really recommend you try these products. And they're also for cats and dogs. I think your cats and dogs will love them. Our cat and dog love them. And I think if you try them, you're going to find that they're not FDA approved. They're supplements. But I think you will find, just use these purple, add to the cart. You'll go directly on to buying these directly from My Vital Seed. They'll ship you the products, and it will benefit us greatly if you go through the Truth Central website in order to get your products. These are remarkable products, and I intend to use them for the rest of my life, and I would hope that many of you will do the same. In wrapping up, this is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Friday, May 12th, 2023. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. We will get through these problems. It always look like these problems are insurmountable, but there are always solutions. And with the help of God, especially if we return to praying and get back to the Bible and the fundamentals of moral living, I believe God will assist us. But I remain confident, and despite the issues we're reporting, I remain confident that the human spirit will prevail in a positive way. I fear, though, what it may take us to get there. We'll be back again on Monday. We're broadcasting every weekday, thetruthcentral.com. Thank you for joining us. God bless.